Tonight's talk is called How to Be a Zionist. I should tell you what this year is not about. I want to try and explore maybe a deeper understanding of what the word Zion, Zioni, the word Zionist comes from the word Zion, and Zion is from the Hebrew Zion. And this, I want to explain the meaning of this word and really how it works out to be quite the opposite of what we would consider to be a conventional understanding of what a Zionist is. So as we know, tonight is called Yom HaZikaron, and tomorrow night will be Yom HaAtzmaut, Independence Day. So these are days which are, let's say, the differences in Israeli society become very apparent. Yom HaZikaron is a memorial day for the fallen of those who fell in the wars of the Jewish people. And there's the Yom HaShoah, which took place, I think, about a week ago. And basically, the Yom HaShoah is a day which, in classical Torah thought, the reason why there was, apprehension about making a separate day and a disagreement over whether there should be a separate day, is that the Yom HaShoah really sets the Holocaust apart. Now, arguably, the Holocaust, the destruction of European Jewry, could be considered to be one of the worst tragedies in the history of the Jewish people. But from our point of view, from the classical Orthodox Torah point of view, all of the tragedies that happened to the Jewish people are connected one to the other. The Inquisition, the Crusades, all of the terrible, terrible suffering that Jewish people have had. They're not individual events. They are something which connects all the way back to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, to the sin of the spies. And that is something that we commemorate on Tisha B'Av. So the idea to set apart Yom HaShoah as a day of special remembrance for a specific terrible event, period in Jewish Hebrew, is, in a sense, disconnecting it from the true problem, the underlying problem, which is, of course, as we know, what we fast about on Tisha B'Av. Every year that the temple's not rebuilt, the Beis HaMikdash is not rebuilt, it's as though Chazal teaches that we went out and we destroyed it b'yadayim, with our own hands. So to get that message that basically all of these things are happening through Jewish history, and it's within our power to fix them. When you take the Shoah, the Holocaust, and you set it aside and you give it a separate day of remembrance, it disconnects it from its extremely important historical, philosophical, and Jewish context. Yom HaZikaron, let's leave that for one moment. Of course, we have to understand that the state, the secular state of Israel, the problem, let's first of all start this off by saying that in Ponevezh Yeshiva, on the first year of the Year of Independence in 1948, in Ponevezh, which is considered to be, I guess, the bastion of Lithuanian Jewry, the mothership of the yeshivas, they said Hallel with a brocha. So times have certainly changed. I think probably at that time it was not so clear that the secular and certainly in some quarters anti-religious nature of the state. And for many people, they looked upon it as, if not the Geula, or even not the beginning of the Geula, but something, a kiss from Shemayim, let's say, a kiss from heaven. And we'll be coming back to this idea of a kiss from heaven later. Yeah.
Did Ponevezh ever say the prayer for the state of Israel? Because that includes the proposition that it's the beginning, Reishit Tzmichat Geulatenu.
I understand.
So they include that in...
Right now, I don't think so.
Before?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know. It's an interesting historical point. But I think there was very much a feeling that there was the potential for something, if it wasn't the beginning, and if it wasn't even, if it wasn't the Geula, and it wasn't even the beginning of the Geula, but it was certainly something very significant in the history of the Jewish people. How you look at that significance, so that varies very widely. We know there are sections, for example, Satmar Hasidim, who are very against the state of Israel. And even so further to the right of them, you have Neturei Karta, and people who, from our point of view, have gone too far to the extent of Holocaust, going to a Holocaust denial festival, whatever you want to call it, in Iran, I think in 2005, I forget the date exactly. But we would say that is an opinion which is off the normative religious scope of opinions. Look, what is all this about? Basically, there's a Gemara in Ksuvas which says that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu adjured, he gave an oath, 3 oaths they're called. 2 of the oaths were connected with the rest of the world, and one of the oaths was connected with the Jewish people. The oaths that the rest of the world were adjured, were placed upon them, was not to oppress the Jewish people, and to the oath that was placed upon the Jewish people was not to come up to Eretz Yisrael in strength. So, I'm sorry, 2 of the oaths pertain to the Jewish people. Those 2 oaths were not to come up to the land of Israel to forcefully reclaim it. And the other 2 for the non-Jews were not to subjugate the Jews excessively. And I'm sorry, right, that's their one, not to subjugate, and our 2 were not to come up in force to the Eretz Yisrael, and not to rebel against the other nations. Exactly, I'm not going to go into now, it's a whole halachic debate whether those 3 oaths still apply, or one of them, whatever. That's really the nub of this whole, discussion about whether we should have come here in the first place, and do these oaths still apply. I would say probably the conventional mainstream opinion is that probably if we'd had our druthers, was the state of Israel a good thing to start in the first place? Probably not. Why? Because it's far from clear that these oaths have been rescinded, that it's not still operative. But seeing as we're here, and seeing as this has happened now, so for sure, we have to learn to live with the state, so to speak. And of course, when it comes to being defended, I'm not going to go into this now either in great depth, but I want to say that Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, Zeichat Livrocha, who was the mashgiach in the Miri Yeshiva during the 6-Day War, said that anybody who doesn't run to the bathroom or gets up to make a cup of coffee in the middle of Seder is being cruel to the soldiers. Because why? Because we understand that our learning, our davening, is playing our part in protecting the Jewish people. So for sure, I don't expect some secular person in Tel Aviv to understand that or to agree with that. And I can see from his point of view, it must be extremely vexing that his son is standing on the front line and, protecting our lives. And, what are we doing? Reading our own, as he would consider it to be, these dusty old books. But from our point of view, for sure, we are doing something which is significant and important. But of course, that's a tremendous responsibility on us. We have to feel like we're in the front line. And that's as true now as it ever was. When we're sitting down and we're learning, we are protecting Klal Yisrael, and we should remember that. So, the problem is that the secular state, of course, again, as you say you have two Jews and 3 opinions. There's the whole idea, the reason for the starting of Zionism, how many different colors and brands of Zionism are secular Zionism, religious Zionism. Some of the more left-wing versions of Zionism understood that the state of Israel was really a device to dismantle Judaism. They wanted to replace God with a secular state. the well-known phrase that says we will not be an independent nation until there's a Jewish criminal sitting in a Jewish jail and a Jewish streetwalker standing on the street of a street in Tel Aviv. That's clearly an attack on the Torah itself. And the idea was to replace the Torah. So that's a very left-wing, and that, unfortunately, that opinion still obtains to this day. There are those feelings. There is a tremendous anti-Semitism. And on the other hand, the vast majority, I think, if you look at the statistics of Jews in this country, are traditional, identify as Jews. They certainly fast on Yom Kippur. They're what we call traditional. It's one of the ironies of history that the Egyptians, when they attacked us in the 1973 war, thought that we'd be very weakened by the fact we'd all be fasting. And that would be a propitious moment to launch an attack on Eretz Israel and the state of Israel. Of course, what they didn't realize is that because Israel basically relies on a huge reservist army, the actual standing army is quite small here. We can't afford to have a huge army. So the main body of the army is all based on reservists, people who can be called up as soon as possible. Now, if you want to mobilize an army, what's the most difficult part of mobilizing an army? Finding where people are. Of course, on Yom Kippur, that's a no-brainer. You just drive around all the shuls and call out people, go into the shul and call out people's names. Of course, the Egyptians didn't think about that. And so therefore, the mobilization of the Yom Kippur War was done extremely speedily. We've seen tremendous nisim, miracles, in the history of the state of Israel. I mean, apparently in the Six-Day War, the Israeli Air Force took out some 90% of the Egyptian aircraft while still on the ground. Now, apparently, this is just something which is not possible to do. The 90% is just a ridiculously high figure. I was told that after the Six-Day War here in Eretz Yisrael, you couldn't get a pair of tefillin. There was a tremendous hisorus of tshuva, and they were sending to America to buy tefillin. What happened was, though, unfortunately, that the symptom of bekochi va'otzim yodi, the understanding was amongst many people in this country, you see what a great air force we have, what a great army we have, and people didn't look at who was behind our great air force and our great army, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then, of course, there was the Yom Kippur War, and finally what happened was, which was the supreme irony in the Gulf War, and I remember, I'll never forget it, sitting in what we had our sealed rooms because we were worried that the Iraqis were going to send across bombs with gas in them. And so we were instructed to take all these windows, and of course it wasn't so easy with the tris boxes, right? So you had to cover the tris box as well and the whole window with plastic. And we used to put smartutim, rags soaked with bleach by the entrance to the doors, by the crack of the door, against the gas. But I remember we went in, and the day the war finished was Shushan Purim. And I remember walking into our sealed room and pulling the plastic off the window with such a feeling of freedom. You've got no idea. To live in Eretz Yisrael and to see these miracles. When that war was extremely ironic, because what did the Israeli army and the Israeli Air Force do in that war? Absolutely nothing. It's as though HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, do you think it's your army, you think it's Navy? I'm going to tell you something. Your army, your Navy, your Air Force is going to sit on its chairs, and I'm going to send the largest, most powerful nation in the world steaming halfway around the world to protect you. And that's really what happened. The Americans protected us. Tremendous miracles. So what is the state of Israel? How do we look at it? How should we react to it? Of course, when it comes to respecting other people's feelings, there's nothing to talk about. If you're on Yom HaZikaron, on the day of Memorial Day, like tomorrow, when the sirens will go off and you're in the street, you stand up. And if you're in a car, you stop and you get over to the side. For sure, you always have to be concerned of the individuals, the personal individuals' feelings. You never know whose father may have been lost in a war, in the Holocaust, whatever it was. So, but in terms of embracing wholeheartedly the celebration of the secular state, as I said, there are very mixed feelings. On the one hand, we have to have tremendous gratitude that we're able to live here, we're able to learn here. Arguably, the state of Israel is the largest supporter of Torah in the history of the world. I'm not sure how willingly that is. Certainly among certain elements of the Knesset, they'd be very happy not to support it. But the fact of the matter is, this is a tremendous schus. And it always gives us cause to worry when there are elements in the Knesset which seek to cut the budget to yeshivas, because unbeknownst to them, we are, and that's our belief, that we are helping to protect the country in the best way possible, certainly for us. In the war, King David never used to go out to fight a battle unless each one of his soldiers had someone sitting in Yerushalayim saying Tehillim, davening, learning for him. In other words, for every pilot there was a rear gunner, somebody sitting, protecting his tail, so to speak, sitting in Yerushalayim, davening for him. So we understand our job, as I said before, is very important, and that job is not just in times of wartime. That job is it protects Klal Yisrael against terrorist attacks. So what does it mean to be a Zionist? So that's really just to put into the context of the situation we live in Eretz Israel. So, the Gemara in Yuma, Nun Daled, Amud Beis, explains that when Hashem created the world, it was not created as one single piece, so to speak. It started off with a very, very small point, and it was extruded, it was drawn out into existence, and at a certain point Hashem said, die, enough, that's it. And that's the name, one of Hashem's name is known as Shah, and then the word die. Shah, die. Mi she'omer la'olam, die. The one HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the world, that's enough. That's the name of a limitation, so to speak. Sufficient, enough, die. So the world was created from a single place, a single spot, and extruded, as we say, until HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided that was enough. Now, interestingly enough, we don't know exactly what that point is. But the tradition is that that first point of existence was a rock, and that rock sits on a small hillside about 3/4 of a mile down the world, in this direction, on Har HaBayis. And it was from there, that is where the world started, the whole of existence started. That was basically the point of connection between this reality, a reality of space and time, and the worlds above this world, which of course have no space and no time. That stone from which all of creation was drawn out is called the Even HaShasiyah, Even HaShtiyah. Even means stone, Shasiyah means foundation. That's called the foundation stoning. It's a foundation stone. In other words, when Hashem created the world, there was one point of contact between this world and the world above this world, that stone. Now that stone has an interesting history, because after its appearance as the beginning of creation, as we understand it, the beginning of the universe, that stone figures also as being the place where Avram Avinu brought Yitzhak up, to sacrifice him. That place was the stone that Yaakov Avinu placed around under his head. That was the place where Yaakov Avinu saw a ladder. Now, the whole idea of a ladder is that it connects. That idea of the ladder was its sulam mutzav arza, a ladder thrust into the ground, stable, set into the ground, mutzav, arza, in the land. V'rosho magia l'shamayim, and its l'shamayim, and its head reaches to the heavens. So that's the idea of the connection between this world. And Yaakov Avinu, when he understood this connection, he said, "Ma nora hamakom hazeh." How awesome is this place? Hashem saw the awe of the connection, the palpable connection between this world and the world beyond. That's ma nora. Now that's also the place, and I think maybe we discussed this last time, but that's also the place where the Beis HaMikdash, and that was the Even Shasiyah, was the stone on which the Aron HaKodesh sat with the luchos inside them. Now, interestingly enough, if you take the word, the Ari says, the word Aron is exactly the same letters as Norah in reverse. So to speak, Aaron, Aleph, Reish, Vov, Nun, is the way we see Hashem's Norah, Nun, Vov, Reish, Aleph, as it comes down to earth. It's the same concept. What we see as Aaron is, so to speak, the projection of Hashem's Norah in this world. And that connection is destroyed with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. It says when the Gemara says that why were the Anshe Knesset Gedola? Remember, the Anshe Knesset Gedola came back to found the second temple after the destruction in Bavel. And amongst them were the last of the prophets, Ezra. And why were they called the Anshe Knesset Gedola, the men of the Great Assembly? Is because they were Machzir Atara Layoshna. They returned the Atara, the crown, to its former glory. And they did this. Let's just maybe have a look at the Gemara here if I can find it. Here we go. It's a Gemara in Yuma. And it says, Lama nikra shman anshe knesset gedolus. He said, why were they called that? Shechziru atara liyoshna. They returned the crown to its former glory. This is the bit I want. Asa Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu came along, and he said, in the Torah this is, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vahanora. And of course we use this in davening. Now of course it's impossible to express any epithets when it comes to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Were it not for the Torah itself describes Hashem as Godol, Gibor, Vanora, we would have no right to say such a thing. But seeing as the Torah says that gives us permission to use those adjectives. What happened? Also Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah came along and he saw the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. V'Oman, he says, Nochrim mekarkarim b'heicholoi. Nochrim, heathens, are mekarkarim, are cavorting, are partying, b'heicholo, in the heichal, in the sanctuary. Ayoy norosov, where is Hashem's Norah? Lo Oma Norah. You can't refer to Hashem by the epithet of Norah anymore, and they actually took out the word Norah from the davening. In other words, after Yirmiyah, they would daven Hashem Hagadol Hagibor, not HaNorah. Now, let's be understood. Now we do, but for a certain period of time, during the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, we did not refer to Hashem by the word Norah. Why? I wanted to just point out that when we talk about Hashem, it's not, God forbid, that Hashem is not Norah. Clearly, that can't be the understanding. All of these epithets are really, all of the midot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are methods by which we understand His interface with His world. Sometimes we see the aspect of Hashem which is Norah, sometimes we see Gadol, sometimes we see Gibor, we see Hashem's Gadol, His chesed, His kindness, sometimes we see Gibor, we see Din, we see strict judgment. But all of these things are merely our perception of His chabrusa, His connection to the world. In Be'etzim, of course, there's nothing we can say about Hashem in any way, no adjective in any way whatsoever. But what it meant was that because this was possible, Hashem, so to speak, had withdrawn His relationship with the world, which was characterized by the adjective Norah. The men of the... because the Pasuk says, Norah Elokim mimikdoshecha. The Norah of God is from your mikdosh. meaning the Heichal. That's where the Midah of Norah is revealed, and of course, as we said before, when that Norah is no longer being revealed there, if it's possible for Nochrim, heathens, to go in there and party and to desecrate it in that fashion, then clearly the Hashem, so to speak, has ceased or stopped for that moment to relate to his world through that Norah. Again, that was the place of the Aron, and as we said, that's the ladder. When Yaakov Avinu saw that connection of Norah was taken away. The Anshe Knesses Hagdola restored the crown to its former glory. How did they do that? They saw that there was a lamb surrounded by 70 wolves, the 70 nations of the world, and the lamb was not devoured. This was an indication of the Norah of Hashem. The Anshe Knesses Gedola, they restored the Norah, the perception of the awe, AWE, of Hashem in this world, not through the Beis HaMikdash anymore, but through the continued unhistorical, anti-historical survival of the Jewish people. This was how Hashem was now revealing his Norah. That perception was why they were called the Anshe Knesses Gedola. That's how they restored the crown to its former glory. And they put back the word Norah into the epithets with which we refer to Hashem. Hashem was still again visible, perceivable as Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah. Louis XIV once asked Pascal for one proof of the existence of God in the world, and he replied to him, "The Jews, Your Majesty." It's something fascinating that if you look at the history of the Jewish people, it's totally non-historical. And of course, historians have been puzzled and find this problematic all over the years. We don't fit into any historical theory. Arnold Toynbee, one of the great historians of the 20th century, called the Jews the fossils of history. For fossils, we seem to be doing pretty well. In point of fact, there's a very famous quote by Mark Twain, I'm sure you've heard it, that said that did I bring it here? It was published in Harper's Bazaar. You can look it up, I'm sure, on Wikipedia. He basically said something like the Jews, said something like the Parthian and the Greek filled the world with fury and pomp, and then have vanished. The Romans now sit in night, and the Greeks and all of the nations have raised up their torch for a while, and they now sit in darkness. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, is now showing no signs of infirmity in his bright and aggressive mind. Something like that, I'm not quoting exactly. Mark Twain clearly saw that there was something, and he asked the question, what is the secret? He says at the end of the article, what is the secret of his immortality? Well, we can answer that question. That is obvious to us. But somebody who doesn't believe in a Kodesh Baruch Hu, or somebody who doesn't believe in the unhistorical, anti-historical history of the Jewish people as the chosen people precisely to fulfill that role. As the Torah says about us, we're going to be the smallest of all nations. Now, in terms of survival, to be a small nation is not a good way to survive, because usually what happens to small nations is they get very smaller and smaller and smaller until they die out. If you're a large nation like the Chinese, you have much better chance of surviving. But the Jewish people, against all odds, have survived, and we're no bigger than we were before the Second World War. And this is a fact that is very difficult for historians. Paul Johnson has a book called The History of the Jews, which is an interesting book, although of course his early analysis of Jewish history, he doesn't have access to Chazal, so it's inaccurate. But he gets to the end of the book, and he says the following. He asked the question, Paul Davis asked the question, how is it the Jews have survived so long? And he says this: the Jews believed for so long and with such tenacity that they were the chosen people, that they became the chosen people. It was a wonderful piece of self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, didn't the Germans, the French, the English all believe they were the chosen people? I mean, you can believe anything you like. I'm a great believer in positive thinking, but positive thinking actually, has a limitation to it. You can believe you're a Martian until the middle of next week, but I doubt you're going to sprout little aerials on the top of your forehead. How is it that a historian, very simply, a historian, by definition, boxes himself into, I'm a historian. That's all. I can't accept anything beyond the definition of my job, which is to be a historian, and to discount anything which might look supernatural or unexplainable in any other way. Let's go back to, so we've got the Norah, we've got the Aaron, which is the same letters. We've got a connection of Sulam Yaakov, Jacob's ladder. When we said at the beginning that there's a pasuk in Tehillim which says, Mizmor, this is Tehillim 50, Nun, Mizmor la'asaf, Mitzion, Michlal Yofi, Elokim Hofia. From Zion, this place called Zion, Michlal Yofi, the summation of beauty. Elokim Hofia, God appeared. So let's look at this pasuk closely. First of all, the word Sion. Now the word Sion is, in fact, connected to another word, Mutsuyan. Now what does Mutsuyan mean? Excellent. Really, Mitzion, and if you look in the Haggadah, it says that Klal Yisrael were Mutsuyonim Sham. Now there, it doesn't mean excellent. In fact, this is one of the few Hebrew words which I think is translated almost exactly into an English. The word is outstanding. The Jewish people were outstanding in Mitzrayim. Outstanding meaning what? They stood out, quite literally, outstanding. Meaning they were recognizable. They didn't change their clothes, they didn't change their language. They were Mitsuyonim. So the word meaning, as modern Hebrew now that we talk about excellent, it's not really excellent, it means outstanding. So outstanding can mean excellent, but outstanding means just that you stick out. Now, if you go up to the north of Israel, presumably not just, but if you go around all the Kevorim there, you'll see something that says what? Tziyun Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Tziyun means a marker. Why? Because it's supposed to make something stand out, to indicate something. Now, let's go back. We said that Mitzion, Michlal Yofi, Elokim Hofia, God appears in this world. And we said that this world, that point called Sion, is the point where the two worlds join. There's a Gemara in Bava Basra where there's a certain Taya, a certain Arab, who takes Baba Bar Chana, and he shows him all these different places. He shows him the place where Korach and his supporters went down to the depth, the Sheol, and he put his ear to the ground, and he could hear Moshe emes v'sorosa emes v'anachnu badim. Moshe is true and his Torah is true, and we are badim, we're false. He took him to another place, and he says, "Come, I will show you where heaven and earth kiss." And he showed him the Mokum HaMikdash. What does it mean that heaven and earth kiss? It means that there's one place, which was the beginning of creation, as we said at the beginning, where there's a connection between the upper world and the lower world. With the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, that palpable connection between what's beyond this world, the fact there is another world, and this world becomes severed. We don't see it anymore. Only the continued existence of the miraculous existence of the Jewish people indicates that. Now we said that that place is called Sion. It's supposed to indicate something. The Aaron, the Norah, sits on something which we said before is the Even Hashasiyah, the foundation stone. The word foundation is apposite. When you found something, foundation means two things. It means the beginning of something, but the foundation of something also within its beginning contains the idea of everything that that entity is supposed to be. For example, the United States of America was founded on the Declaration of Independence. So that the Declaration of Independence really does two things. It declares there's something new, it founds it, but it also sums up what it's supposed to be. So when we say that the Even HaShasiyah is the foundation stone, so whatever's sitting on that foundation stone, which is the Aaron, which is the Norah, means that this entire world is supposed to be mitzayin, to indicate that there's a world above this world. So the whole idea of secular Zionism, I'm talking about left-wing secular Zionism now, which is to totally divorce everything, anything spiritual, any connection between the Jewish people and Avinu Shabashamayim, is the absolute antithesis of what the Torah understood the word Tzion to indicate. Tzion means an indicator. What's it indicating? The connection, the sulam, the ladder, which is thrust into the ground and reaches to the Shemayim. The Gemara in Megillah says that the Aaron, very strange statement, Ha'aron eino minamida. The Aaron HaKodesh, eino minamida, takes up no space. Has no size. Which is extremely strange, because if you look in the Torah, the dimensions of the Aaron are given very clearly. It says the Aaron is 2.5, right? Amasayim v'chetzi by length, Amma v'chetzi, 1.5 wide, Amma v'chetzi tall. So we know the Torah itself gives us exact dimensions as to the size of the of the Aaron. So how can it be that the Gemara in Megillah says that the Aaron eina minamida? I wonder if I drew this out before, if I have to save myself some time. No, I didn't. Okay, so what does it mean then? So the Gemara has to be understood like this. When two entities meet, you would expect to see evidence of both of those entities represented at the point at where they meet. I'll give you a very prosaic example. Let's say you're driving from France to Italy. And as you get to closer to the border, you'll see in French the word douane, 5 kilometers. And underneath that, you'll see another sign saying dogana, 5 kilometers. Now, douane means customs in French. Dogana means customs in Italian. So, right, you have on top the French and underneath the Italian. After you go through the border, you'll look in your rearview mirror and you'll see it says Dogana on the top, because that's the Italian side. In other words, it's a very simplistic example where you get two entities meeting. You will expect to see evidence of both of those things. What am I talking about here? If you took a measure, have you got a pen? Someone got a pen? Thank you very much. It works. Baruch Hashem. We have Siyat D'Shmayim. Okay, let me just do my sketch here. X, Y, 1, Y, 2. X equals Y, 1 plus Y, 2. Okay, can you see this? This is the Kodesh Kadoshim. This is the Holy of Holies. This is the Aron HaKodesh. Okay, excuse my rather rudimentary drawing. Let us say you took a tape measure and you measured from one side of the Kodesh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies, to the other. This measurement we will call X. And then you took your tape measure and you measured from this wall to this side of the Aron HaKodesh, which we'll call Y1. And you took your tape measure and you measured from this side of the Aron HaKodesh to the other wall, and we'll call that Y2. When the Gemara says Aaron eina mina mida, it's this equation. Forget that bit of the book. X, this distance, was the same as this and this put together. This is the understanding of what it means, Aaron eina mina mida. The Aaron has dimension. is 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5, but it takes up no space. And if you think about it, that's exactly what you would expect when two realities meet. This is a world of space and time. The worlds above this world have no space and time. When you have a portal, when you have a meeting of those two entities, you would expect to see evidence of both those facts. In other words, the iron is in this world. It has dimension, 2.5, 1.5, 1.5. But it's at a place which is on the gateway. It's the Sulam Motziv Arza above this world, and therefore it occupies no space. This is, I think, the understanding of the Gemara. This idea of connection, we say in the davening every day, L'cha Hashem hagadula, hagavura, v'hatiferes, v'netzach, v'hod, ki chol b'shamayim v'aretz. Ki chol b'shamayim v'aretz, all of these, L'Hashem hagadula, gadvura, all of these qualities represent various midas. Gedula is chesed. We'll come on to this maybe in the weeks to come. Gevura is din. If you go all the way down the list, the seventh of those midot, kichol b'shamayim va'aretz. Kichol, chol is a lashon of lichlol, to combine, and that is the midah of Yosef. Yosef was the mashbia, the one who channeled the sustenance of the world. He was in charge of the Egyptian economy and the distribution of food. He was the channel which was the power line, so to speak. Now, the gematria of Yosef, if you don't believe me, you can work it out, is Tzion. Just like Tzion is the pipeline, the energy that feeds from this world to the above world to this world. So Yosef was that pipeline. He was kichol b'shamayim va'aretz. He was kolel. He was michlal. He joined together shamayim va'aretz. Now we'll see Yosef, right? So Yosef, Yud is 10, Vav is 6, Samech is 60, Peh is 80, 156. Tzion, Tzadi is 90, Yud is 10, Vav is 6, and Nun is 50, 156. So the same gematria for Yosef and Tzion.
So Sion, it's not specifically a location.
It is a location.
It's the location of the Eben Shasiya.
And also the beginning of the connection of this world to the world above, and it's called Sion because it is supposed to be mitzayin, to indicate, to point out, as if to say, look up. There's a connection. There's a connection between this world and the world above. And that connection was destroyed with the Nochrim B'Karkrim B'Chei, the Midah of Nora, the Aaron, right, that we saw Aleph, Reish, Nun, Vav, Reish, Aleph coming down. That was lost. The Anshe Knesset Gadola returned that with their perception of the eternity, with the indestructibility of the Jewish people. That now becomes the Nora. So when I'm just pointing out that when you have people or a group of people who wish to destroy that perception of the Jewish people as an internal nation, as a people who are in this world to indicate that thing, then we're in really big danger, because that's the job of the Jewish people. We are now the Tzion. We are Tzion, quite simply. So we are the indicators. And if we don't want to be the indicators, or we have a view amongst us that says, no, we're not indicating anything. We want a Jewish ganef in a Jewish jail. We want to be Kakola, Goyim, Klal Yisrael. We want to be like all of the rest of the nations of the world. That's extremely dangerous.
That's not Zionistic.
That's what I was saying. It's the opposite of what Chazal, what we understand that the purpose of Tzion is. This is the absolute travesty of such an opinion. I just end with the following, that excuse me, Shlomo HaMelech, in his wisdom, he was the wisest of all men. One of the things that Shlomo was able to do was to grow plants in a certain place in Yerushalayim, which would typically only grow, let's say, in the Amazon or in the Congo. He could grow them right here in Yerushalayim. Why? Because Shlomo, in his wisdom, remember, nothing ki chol bashamayim va'aretz, nothing can exist in this world unless it has a spiritual cable, a pipeline of energy to keep it in existence. The physical world can only can exist if it has a spiritual component to it. So therefore, everything that comes down, everything that spreads out in this world, everything that comes down to this world has to come through Yerushalayim. That's the main pumping station. That's the grand terminus, so to speak, of all of that electrical spiritual energy that comes down. And then, quite literally, it spreads out through all of these spiritual cables to all over the world. So some plant that grows in the Amazon basin or in Peru or in India, how does it grow? It's because down through the Beis HaMikdash comes this power cable that goes all the way to Africa, and it grows out over there. Now, if you're Shlomo HaMelech, you know where all these cables are. And therefore you can grow a plant which shouldn't really grow in Yerushalayim, and it should only grow in India, right here in Beit Vegan.
So it's an actual physical phenomenon.
It's a physical, spiritual phenomenon.
Meaning you can't just dig and obviously there's going to be a pipe, but
No, there's no pipe.
in the physical, geographical
Right.
sense, there's a spot where this is and this isn't.
Right, B'diuk.
Wow.
And if you think about it, if it really makes sense. If nothing in this world can have a kiyum, an existence, and no physical thing can have a kiyum unless it has a spiritual influx, a spiritual power, just like a human being can't exist without a neshama. So everything in this world has some kind of level on its, whatever its level is, of spirituality. For sure, it's on a lower and lower level. Right? There are 4 levels of existence. There's the highest level is man, who is a madaber. The next level is chaya. Chaya means living, which is basically animals. The next level after that is called Somayach, plant life. The lowest level is called domem, which is basically stones. Inanimate, right? Inanimate. There's a better word for it, but that'll do. So, but everything has to have some kind of spiritual influx for it to be able to have any kind of existence at all.
You could find out where those pipelines are if you manage to find a spot to encircle it and then plant every one of those plants in a circle, and whichever one grows, you mark that spot for that plant, and then you can keep doing it.
I thought you were going to say this. Sounds like something for a startup nation, right? I guess Israeli startup, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, joking apart. So what did we learn this evening? We really, let's just sum up that we said that the word Sion means to indicate. What's it supposed to indicate? It's supposed to indicate that there's a world above this world. We said there's the Even HaShasiya, Hushtat foundation, something which is the foundation of something is the beginning of something, but it also sums up what that thing is supposed to be. So when we say that this world was founded on a place called Sion, it means the entire purpose of this world is to indicate that there is a connection to the world above. Then we talked about Yosef as the same gematria as Tzion. We talked about Mitzion Michlal Yofi, the summation, the chlal, right? It's the joining together of Yofi. Now the word Yofi, beauty in the Jewish sense, and we'll finish with this. The Greek world says that beauty is only skin deep. We understand that the true beauty of something is where the pnimius of something, the internality of something, is expressed to the outside. For example, the word in Hebrew for face is panim. Panim is exactly the same word as pnim, which means the inside. The face of a person is where you see who he is. If you think about it, one of the fascinating things about the human face is with a very, very limited palette, so to speak, of possibilities of 2 ears, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, that the Kodesh Baruch Hu has managed to create billions and billions and billions and untold numbers of individual human faces. And the reason is that the pnim of every person is different. So the Mitzion Michlal Yofi, the idea of the Yofi, of the beauty of somebody, is the Yofi is in the face, and the face shows the pnim. The secular idea of beauty is, it's interesting because in Hebrew the word for ugly is mechuar. Muchu'ah is connected to the word to mean opaque. The whole concept of Jewish beauty is that which is transparent, where you can see pnim. The beauty of a person is in the face. Something which is opaque, which doesn't show you the pnim, is opaque, and that's the same word as ugly. So Tzion is the beauty, Michlal Yofi, because it shows us the pnim. It shows us the internality of the world. It shows us that this world is a world which is connected. That's the Sulam Yaakov, and that is the job of the Anshe Knesset Gedola. And they return the crown to its former glory by pointing out the eternality, the eternal nature of the Jewish people. And it's our job, in what we're doing here in Somayach, with our learning, with our davening, with our midas tovas, fulfilling the Torah and learning the Torah, that we are bringing down into this world. This is really Kiddush Hashem. Maybe I'll end with a very short idea. The last week's Parsha, the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, anybody who is Mechalal Shem Shemayim B'Seisa will be punished b'Fahesia. Anybody who desecrates the name of Hashem in private will be publicly punished. Now, if you think about it, it's one of these things that you read without really thinking about it, but hang on a second, what does it mean, anybody who desecrates Hashem's name in private? Isn't the whole idea, Chas v'Chalila, of Chil Hashem is something which was done publicly that people saw, and they go, wow, how can an Orthodox Jew do this? Or how can a Jew do this? Our whole concept of Chil Hashem is all public. Where do you ever see there's a possibility, Chalila, of Chil Hashem in private? So in last week's Parsha it says, one of the things it says, you should not take my name in vain, v'lo chalalta eshmi shem kodshi, something like that, not exactly. It's not quite the pasuk. Don't take my name in vain, and by doing that you will desecrate my holy name. Meaning that there are certain things, certain aveiros, that if they're done, even in secret, a person could make a false oath, an unnecessary oath, in Hashem's name. And by doing that, he creates an energy which makes Hashem smaller in the world, where people don't see the hand of Hashem so much, where the Jewish people are looked at as being lower. If this is true, so it comes out that the corollary is also true. We tend to think of Kiruv as like, we've got to get out there and we've got to spread the word. And I'm not putting that down. Of course, there are some people and there is a great necessity to spread light amongst the ignorance. But don't think that you're not doing Kiruv by sitting here in Somayach and breaking your head over a Tosfos. The Nefesh HaChaim, Chaim Voloshin, says all the Jewish people are connected together. It's one large neshama. And he says that, God forbid, if there's a great Talmud Chacham who one day doesn't learn quite as hard as he really could, what does that mean? It means that the guy who usually learns Gemara, that day he learns Chumash. The guy who learns Chumash picks up a book about a famous life of a great rabbi, and the one who reads the book about the great rabbi will pick up a secular novel, all the way down till finally a Jewish boy marries a non-Jewish girl in Paris. Meaning what? That when we, on our small level, we work as hard as we can. We're not just doing good things for ourselves. We're not just doing good things for the cosmos, which of course we are, but we are making Kiddush Hashem. Hashem's name becomes clearer in the world. Hashgacha becomes clearer. People see the Yad Hashem. Okay, so that's really our discussion for tonight. Do you have any questions? I'll be happy to answer them.
Maybe that's what it means to be a Zionist.
That's the tagline, right? That's what it means to be a Zionist, exactly. That's what it means to be a Zionist. Yeah. To show there's a connection. Okay, guys.